What's up, everybody? Welcome to Podcast Now. I'm Alex. In this video, I want to talk a little bit about Neil Druckmann's Variety interview. Look, it was a big one. It was talking about a bunch of different things, and I'll be honest, I don't care about a good amount of the things. A lot of it's talking about the Hollywood side and The Last of Us show, and are there any plans to do like Intergalactic as a Hollywood production? And it's like I feel, and look, Neil has asked these questions. It's not like he's going out there like demanding people ask him these specific questions. That's the kind of stuff I'm not into. And to be fair, he gave, I think, some really good answers to that, right? That Intergalactic needs to be a game first. It needs to be a really good game. And while they're already getting pitches for an Intergalactic thing, they got to focus on making it the best game freaking possible. They can't be worried about if it's going to get a TV show 3 years down the line. And I like that answer. And I don't like the questions because I just feel, and maybe that's like the anti-Hollywood or the biasness, of course, of my love of gaming. Focus on the game. Games are the most important, especially for what we talk about. And, when you announce a brand new game, I don't give a flying F, right? If it's going to get a movie 6 years down the line or a trilogy, I care about if the game is going to be good. So he gave good answers there, but there's a couple things that stood out, one of which was he flat out teased more Last of Us project. I think his specific words were, and there's more stuff happening in the Last of Us world that has not been announced. To me, this felt like an article or an interview, I should say, right? Where he felt almost the most comfortable to talk about these things that he's been the most secretive of leading into them. Like, for the longest time, it was, there was never really a plan for The Last of Us 3, and then there probably was a plan. Like, he wrote the entire thing back, forth, right? If you've watched enough Neil Druckmann interviews or listened to him or read them, you'll know that he kind of has gone back and forth of like, okay, like you definitely had it, but then you kind of took that back and said like it was never in the cards, all of this stuff. Well, he kind of said in Variety, like after Last of Us 2 came out, the first thing they did is start to kind of almost prototype. He talked about throwing around ideas of what could become like a Last of Us 3, and they backed off of that, right? He talked about, by the way, that like Uncharted is still an IP, is still something that's a possibility, Jak and Daxter, but they wanted to do a sci-fi game, and that led them down the path to, eventually make Intergalactic. So it's just, to kind of finish, because The Last of Us was such a big part, I think, of this conversation. It's just interesting to me. I don't know about you guys. You can let me know in the comments, but he seemed almost the most open, where it's like, well, now he's talking about how they had almost, it sounded like, make Last of Us 3 after 2. So you probably, by the way, had some ideas for all the times he said, if this is it, this is it. I've always said that's BS. I think he's just lying to us to kind of draw it out and to get our excitement, which is fair. Game companies do that quite often. You're not going to have him announce The Last of Us Part 3 in an interview, before Intergalactic even comes out or before this stuff. Like, he's going to kind of lead us on a wild goose hunt. But I think he's left breadcrumb trails, to be honest with you. Like, I do think Last of Us 3 is going to happen. But again, going back to that comment, like there's other things in the Last of Us world that's not been announced. I mean, isn't that almost what could that be? Because you have the show, you have season 3, but he's not as involved. He's still kind of part of it, but really not, at least in the way that he was. But like, you're going to do like a novel or a comic, or, I mean, like some people, and actually I thought about this too, like I saw tweets on it. I was thinking, yeah, it's one of the first things that popped into my head as well. Like, is this like a Factions 2 revival going on here? The interesting thing is, or the question I would have is he talking Naughty Dog with The Last of Us? Because like what could they really do, especially doing Intergalactic, right? Like, they could have some early concepts for The Last of Us Part 3, but also, I don't know, like, it becomes a longer conversation than it really needs to be honest with you right now. You're not going to announce The Last of Us 3 when Intergalactic is still, like, a year and a half plus away, right? So it's like, if this is his way of teasing a future game, if it is 3, and if it is coming from them, this would be a pretty silly way, and that silly is using a light word there, to do it, because it's like, well, you're not going to announce it for like 2+ years at this point, so why even like drop that kind of hint, unless it's a book or a behind the scenes documentary again, or what I mean, something that is, well, like literally what he says, it's in the world of The Last of Us, but it's not like it's not the third game, although I do think a third game would come. Remember, there is like a second Naughty Dog team that's working on something. A lot of people think it would be kind of like a Lost Legacy Uncharted game. I mean, I've thought about that, and I kind of thought that's what they could be doing. Maybe the team is making like a smaller Last of Us game. Maybe we've been duped, right? We think it's an Uncharted game, and it's actually a Last of Us game. We'll see, on that situation. And then, in terms of Intergalactic, they talk about some of the casting. He dropped, he talked about Troy Baker, that Troy's going to be in the game. And then he did actually drop the hint that like there may actually be other people from Uncharted and The Last of Us, other actors that join that game. I mean, I would love like a small Nolan North role, or, anybody, really any Richard McGonigal or Ashley Johnson, of course, right? Any of them I think would be really cool about that. And then the only other like big part was really talking about the gameplay, right? This evolution from going from Uncharted to RPG elements with Last of Us, and then like Intergalactic is taking that next step. Intergalactic's gameplay is a difficult thing to talk about because like when you can't see it, and we have really like you don't know, right? Like we literally don't know what it looks like. But I'm kind of really excited. If that maybe sounds weird, you can let me know. But like I do actually get really excited to think about what the gameplay of Intergalactic is, because if it's just kind of like this hack and slash, like Souls-like type thing, like I just feel Naughty Dog is going to do something unique, but something maybe a little bit familiar, like The Last of Us 2 gameplay is familiar, but it's also kind of one of a kind. And even replaying it, I replayed it for the 5-year anniversary. Like if you forgot how good that gameplay is, and the AI and just all that stuff, like I recommend like going back into it, because it is, I think the gameplay of that game is fantastic. Now it's an evolution of a lot of what has come before, and again, like there is then the AI and how characters interact and all that jazz. I think is really cool. So like just trying to like speculate or think in my head like, okay, well, let's take Last of Us and let's move it to Intergalactic. It's pretty hard. Like I actually can't see Intergalactic's gameplay in my head, if that makes sense. But I think that when they show it, it's going to be quite good. It's honestly the most anticipated element of that entire game. Like the story and characters is a 50-50 coin toss. Maybe I'll be into it, maybe I won't. But the gameplay is like I feel good, or I have like a lot of hope. But it's like I guess you never know until you know, right? So it was an interesting interview. Like it continues to get me thinking about Intergalactic's gameplay, which is honestly a plus. I think anytime you can do that. And then you got some of The Last of Us talk. There's something coming, and I would prefer, by the way, a game like even if it's a smaller thing or DLC. Yeah, I'm really gonna do DLC Last of Us 2. Maybe it's factions, maybe it's a smaller game, or maybe it's Last of Us 3. I really hope it's not some like here's a behind the scenes documentary of The Last of Us Season 2. I don't need that. I don't care, and I hope that's not what he's talking about. So let me know what you guys think. Make sure, as always, you're subscribed to the channel, bell icon turned on, and I hope to see you all on the next one.